Hello, my name is Amy Alvarado, and I will be informing you of the evolution or history of rock. Rock is one of the most influential genres and has evolved rapidly throughout the years. It's changed in sound, and there are so many genres to rock music. Um, the main influence of rock would derive from the music genre called the blues and jazz, which is surprising because rock can be a genre with many subgenres of intense, energetic, and loud music compared to blues and jazz, which both are generally soothing and not so intense as rock is. Rock and roll emerged in the United States in the early to mid 1950s and derived from the earlier rhythm and blues of the 1940s. Legendary disc jockey and host of popular music program The Moondog Show on Cleveland AM radio station, Alan Freed began to promote a new style of music, which was rock. Freed adopted a new hip persona, which included the creation of the phrase rock and roll to describe the music he was promoting in the radio station, with record store owner Leo Mintz in the 50s. By the 60s, the style expanded and rock and roll was a genre now known as rock. This new sound and style drew inspiration from R&B, blues, and jazz. Advances in music technology, such as the electric guitar in the early 50s, led to the instrument being commercially available and adapted in several genres. Then eventually it became more accessible, and common instruments used for rock and roll were the guitar, bass, and drums, which became more popular over time in this sound. Artists like Chuck Berry, who is said to be one of the most influential rock and roll performers, also known as the father of rock and roll, and Elvis Presley, who is known as the king of rock and roll, became very significant in America, as well as the history of rock. In the 50s, artists such as Chuck Berry leaned heavily on the structures of classical blues in his sound. But as rock developed, many genres were leaned on in rock, and that's why rock is not just one thing. It's a bunch of different melodies and sound, and it's not put into a box. The Rolling Stones even collaborated with Muddy Waters, who is a blues musician, and their name, the Rolling Stones, was inspired by one of Muddy Waters' songs called The Rolling Stone. Rock and roll shifted the taste of music over time and has expanded throughout its history. The sounds in rock music can feel spontaneous, uninhibited, with no rules and the freedom to experiment with the sound. People found that they were able to express themselves through music in whichever way they chose to when it came to rock. Sam Phillips, founder of Sun Records, who discovered Elvis Presley himself, gave the chance for aspiring artists to come to the studio and play their tunes. Phillips loved music and was interested in listening to music that sounded different, as well as music that felt more authentic and more lively, and that evoked emotion rather than it having to be having to have strict rules in it. Rock consists of subgenres such as jazz, reggae, folk, and electronic, amongst others, diverging into spin-off genres like British pop, punk, grunge, surf, etc. Classical music as well has great roots within the rock industry in ways so technical, such as the concepts of melody, arrangement, and dynamics, which are not only influential in rock but as well as in other genres. Rock has not only become a way of life but a gateway to other genres such as R&B, blues, and jazz. By the late 70s and 80s, punk rock emerged with bands such as The Clash and Ramones. By this time, alternative and grunge rock groups began to come up as well, which is where bands such as the Pixies and Nirvana would come up. In the early eras of rock, its aggressive attack suggested a sexual freedom that was shocking during this time. It was a very conservative time and a very conservative era. By the 60s, the genre had expanded and there was an increase in embracing sex and youthful rebellion in music. By the 70s, bands like Led Zeppelin brought a more darker and heavier tone to the genre, which kickstarted the hard rock / metal genre, as well as Pink Floyd, who added the psychedelic elements into their music and experimented with the sounds, which led to the progressive rock music movement. Around the same time, punk was born. Punk had a more rude attitude within the music, and the artists, more enraged singing and loud guitars. Artists like The Clash became mainstream. As rock entered the 21st century, that's where we have artists like Linkin Park fusing hip-hop and metal together, while other artists still stick to the traditional elements of rock. But rock will always continue to evolve in sound as different artists continue to experiment with the sounds. In conclusion, rock has changed over time and many things have influenced the sound in rock music. It's said that music itself is far more ancient and was used as a way of communicating before language itself. And the truth is that music is relatively new and it's more of a luxury than a basic necessity of life. Rock is diverse in sound, and if you ever find yourself listening to rock music and finding satisfaction in rock, you should keep in mind that you're actually enjoying multiple genres at once, which creates the rock and roll atmosphere. It's just a bunch of different sounds. And rock will continue to evolve as different artists keep coming up and experimenting with music and melodies. So I hope I've informed you well enough of the evolution of rock and how diverse rock music really is. Thank you.